Would you like to discover how important CM Punk was behind the scenes in the creation of the Shield? Are you ready to find out how he almost died because of an infection on his back? Are you curious to know how WWE made him lose $15,000 in a questionable way, to say the least? Can you guess which privilege the company denied him but granted to Brock Lesnar? You will have all the answers in this video. You are on the Wrestling Paradise. 7 crazy stories about CM Punk. Let's go! At the time when CM Punk was negotiating a new contract in the summer of 2011, he had a request to the WWE that was important to him. He wanted to wear some fight shorts and to have his own sponsors on them, which would have been a good way for him to have an additional income. For example, there were talks for a sponsorship between Punk and the snack brand Slim Jim, whose boss he had even met, and with whom an ad had already been thought out in which he would have played a holiday camp instructor. But when WWE heard about this deal that the Chicago Kid got on his own, the company made sure to replace CM Punk with Rey Mysterio, Big Show, and Eve Torres to do what he was supposed to do at first. WWE denied him the opportunity to have his sponsors and to wear fight shorts. This is one of the stories that really frustrated the wrestler, especially since he saw that sometime later, the WWE gave Brock Lesnar the possibility of having his sponsors and his fight shorts. There's no doubt that it was really something to be pissed off about. When CM Punk was the champ, WWE offered him to shoot in one of the movies produced by the company's film studio. The kid from Chicago was very happy at that moment. Even if he considered their movies suck, it would allow him to have some rest, which he didn't have for years, and he would be able to heal from his injuries. He talked about it with Triple H, asked the Cerebral Assassin when the shooting was taking place. Triple H told him the dates, and then Punk realized that it was during the European tour. It surprised him a lot, especially since he was the champion, and there was no way he would be allowed to skip that tour. Triple H then told him that it was not during the European tour. Punk told him it was and asked to figure out a solution for his shooting dates for the movie. In the end, he would learn the next day on the WWE website that Randy Orton would finally have the role he was supposed to have in this movie. And Triple H didn't even call him to inform him. Obviously, Punk was treated like rubbish by WWE on some occasions. But wait until you see number 1, folks, which is even worse. Stay tuned. At the end of 2013, CM Punk had a lump on his back that was swelling more and more, and he was quite worried. When he showed it to the WWE doctors, they didn't really take it seriously, saying that it had to be some fat and that it was nothing serious. They just gave him antibiotics and didn't want to cut it out either, because it would force them to put stitches on him, which would prevent Punk from wrestling while the company needed him. In addition to the physical pain he already had, these antibiotics were going to make Punk's life a living hell. He could no longer sleep, nor move without being in pain, and it even gave him diarrhea regularly. Until the Royal Rumble 2014, it was a battle between Punk, who couldn't take it anymore and who wanted to have his lump removed, which swelled even more and turned purple, and the doctors who only gave him antibiotics without really helping him. When he left the WWE after the Rumble, AJ Lee, Punk's wife, eventually convinced him to go to see a doctor. And at that moment, when he discovered this lump, the doctor was shocked and told him that it was a serious infection. Considering that he had it for 3 months, Punk could really have died, according to the doc. He cut it out, it even exploded on the ceiling, and the kid from Chicago said it was the worst pain of his life. After that, he was finally able to sleep, but he would never forgive the WWE doctors for what was, in his eyes, a dangerous carelessness on their part. Something CM Punk always hated about WWE is the fact that the Federation never had long-term plans for its superstars. That it advanced by improvising more or less rivalries and storylines, without any real project. Well, except for one superstar. Can you see who I'm talking about? Of course, none other than John Cena. Indeed, Punk stated that at the time when he was working in WWE, Vince McMahon only had one question in his meetings with the writers. What's next for John Cena? According to Punk, this was really the only thing the boss was interested in, and it's something that he didn't like at all, especially because of the fact that there were 26 writers that apparently knew nothing about being in a fight, according to him, and it drove him crazy. Obviously, WWE's way of working wasn't made for the Chicago Kid. Between 2012 and 2014, a dominant faction left its mark on WWE, The Shield, which was composed of the one who would become a legend of the game, Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, and Dean Ambrose. But did you know that CM Punk claims to be the one who had the idea for this faction? In fact, at first, the writers were looking to create a group of which he would be the leader, and whose initial goal was to make him more threatening in his rivalries with The Rock and The Undertaker. While there were talks of forming a group with Big Show, Daniel Bryan, and Seth Rollins, CM Punk said that he preferred it to be composed of young wrestlers from Florida Championship Wrestling who would be ready to start in the main roster. Then, Vince McMahon and Triple H thought that it was a good idea and asked him who he had in mind, and the Chicago Idol told them Seth Rollins, Dean Ambrose, and Chris Hero. They accepted but replaced Hero with Roman Reigns, who was their choice. And in the end, what's amazing is that the day Punk faced The Shield in a match at the TLC pay-per-view in 2013, it was precisely about Roman Reigns that a lot of officials annoyed Punk for hours on the day of the show, telling him non-stop to make him look very strong. Clearly, from that time, we can say that the future tribal chief was already considered as the next big superstar of the company. It's still crazy to think that if WWE had not wanted to create a faction around CM Punk, and if the latter hadn't suggested to bet on young wrestlers, Roman Reigns might have never been part of The Shield, and his early career would have probably been much different. Another story that was a bone of contention between WWE and CM Punk is the one about the checks that the kid from Chicago was supposed to get. In fact, when he had already left the company and he was in the middle of his suspension period, which would lead to his dismissal, Punk found a check from the company at his house that he had never cashed, and also realized that there was another royalty check that the company forgot to give him. Then he called their office, where they were apparently panicking at the idea of talking to the one who would later become their public enemy. They told him one of their lawyers had that check. And what is absolutely mind-blowing is that for weeks afterwards, Punk called and texted this lawyer and also the office every day to tell them to fix this problem, but no one answered him. On the other hand, the funny thing is that Mark Carano, the person who was in charge of talent relations, called him several times by accident and even sent him empty messages without Punk knowing if it was completely accidental or if there was a meaning behind it. Anyway, what's for sure is that communication between WWE and CM Punk was never a strength in their relationship. Something that pissed CM Punk off a lot was the time WWE intentionally made him lose thousands of dollars. At the time of his famous pipe bomb and when he was at the peak of his fame, he was contacted by Wizard World, a company that offered him to do a 4-hour signing session in Nashville for $20,000. For Punk, it was great to win so much money without having to take any bump. But while WWE was not involved in the story, he had the bad idea to tell them about it, and he would end up having a very unpleasant surprise. On Twitter, Wizard World announced that CM Punk was being replaced by Daniel Bryan at that signing session. The kid from Chicago called WWE to understand what was going on, and they told him he couldn't go to this signing because the tickets for the house shows in Mexico that were taking place at the same time were not selling well enough, and they needed him to improve the ticket sales. He then demanded that they pay him at least $20,000 for the shows in Mexico, which was only fair according to him, since that was the amount he was going to earn for sitting on a chair during 4 hours signing autographs. They told him that it was okay, except that after those shows in Mexico, where he even had hardcore matches while still being injured, he found out that WWE only paid him $5,000. And he would not even be rewarded for having created this business for WWE, since many other superstars, including John Cena and The Shield, were able to do some signings thanks to him. This story, in which he could have earned $20,000 very easily, but instead ended up destroying his health even more for $15,000 less, is obviously one of the incidents that made CM Punk want to leave Vince McMahon's empire. As a bonus, we could also talk about 2 other incidents that took place during CM Punk's last year in the WWE, and clearly they must have pissed him off. At the time they were giving him antibiotics for his injuries, an annoying side effect that he had was diarrhea. As you can imagine, for someone who wrestled in a ring in front of thousands of people, disasters can quickly happen. And in the end, it did. Punk pooped himself doing a SmackDown. And at that moment, in a remarkable act of self-mockery, he tweeted about this incident, telling people to go watch the show to see him in this funny situation. But despite the fact that his colleagues laughed about this tweet, WWE asked him to delete it, because it wasn't PG in their opinion. So that's what he did. But as a reaction to their lack of humor, he blocked the company on Twitter while he was still working there. And the other incident that we could mention is the day he almost missed the wedding of one of his best friends. For months, he told the officials that in December it was out of the question that he would miss this important event. But no one listened to him. And in the end, this wedding took place on the day of TLC. And WWE wanted him to face The Shield at that show, while he was telling them for months that on that date he had this wedding. In the end, he asked to be in the first match and to have a jet right after that would fly him and his wife to California, where the wedding was taking place. And fortunately, he was still able to be there. But once again, this story shows that between Punk and the company, it was very often a dialogue of the deaf. Wasn't that incredible? Who would have thought that CM Punk had to deal with so many frustrating situations in WWE? Can you believe he could have died because of the infection he had? And the pivotal part he had in the creation of The Shield? All these stories clearly show that all these years, Punk and the WWE never really were on the same page. We can say that this topic raises a lot of questions. I hope you had a good time watching this video, and I invite you to stay in the paradise of wrestling to look at some other ones. See you right away.
And that's the bottom line, 'cause Stone Cold said so. What?